Last time on the Skip and Josh podcast.
Okay, like could we just tell everybody what we're talking about in case they
Yes,
don't
Gary
realize
Bettman was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame. And when I found this out, by the way, there was a rumor that it was going to happen. I heard some buddies at work talking about it, and I said, I really hope that's just a rumor and it's not true, because if it's actually true, A, I'm going to vomit, and B, I might never watch hockey again.
You're listening to the Skip and Josh podcast with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Hello?
Skippy,
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm freezing cold. My basement is freezing.
You can adjust that, I think.
No, like we just had a crazy heat wave. You had the same.
Yes.
But the hotter it gets outside, we have the air conditioning going in the house. The basement just like it's like an ice box.
Mm-hmm.
But I turned off the air conditioning. I hope the rest of my family won't be mad at me. I turned it off just 5 minutes ago because I didn't want the sound of the air conditioner coming into the podcast. So I just have to remember to turn it back on for everybody else. Otherwise, I'm going to be in big trouble.
Is anyone in your family awake right now?
Yes.
Oh, I'm surprised.
Yes. A couple people are awake. I think Selena's still sleeping, but Matthew's going to Comic-Con today.
Oh my goodness, you've brainwashed him. He's another one of you now.
Well,
he's a junior you.
I've been asking him to go to Comic-Con for about 7 years, and he never wanted to go. Now it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going with my friend, so I'm not even going.
I thought they only had it in Toronto.
No, well, they have the one in Toronto is huge, I think, but the one here is, they go around to pretty much every city, but I know when I've seen the one in Toronto, the guest list is quite big. It's like double the size of this one.
World Cup Soccer.
What have you been up to? You told me you took a few notes this week. I mean, honestly, if you want to talk about the world of sports in the past week for me, there's only one word.
What's that word?
England.
Okay, that's a word.
That's all. That's consumed. It's consumed every minute of my day. It's consumed everything I watch, everything I listen to.
Didn't they only play one game this past week?
Well, since we last recorded, they've played two.
Oh.
They played Colombia. They won in the penalties.
Mm-hmm.
And then yesterday they played Sweden, and they advancing to the semifinals.
Right. And so me, who knows very little about soccer, knows that England hasn't played a team that they should have lost to yet.
Well, they did lose to Belgium in the group stage, but it's that was backups versus backups. Both
they
teams
tried to lose that.
Yeah, both teams didn't have anything to play for. Yeah, no, they've been favored in every game. They're going to be favored against Croatia in the semifinal also.
The only time they won't be favored is in the final, maybe.
Well, they won't be favored in the final, that's for sure. Of either Belgium or France will definitely be favored. But the World Cup is kind of crazy because people online and you read things on Twitter, they haven't played anybody good, they haven't been tested. Yeah, but you can only play the games that are put in front of you, You can't say, we volunteered to play Brazil, But you know what? Brazil lost, and Sweden beat Germany. And, Sweden is the team that knocked Italy out of even being in the World Cup, So you can't, just because there's a lot that goes on reputations, and with good reason, because obviously certain countries have big reputations that are well-deserved. But you play who's in front of you, So
I think Sweden actually lost to Germany.
Yes, you're right. But I mean, they're more or less responsible. They got through that group ahead of Germany.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
So I have a few questions for you about the World Cup.
Oh, please. I'm ready to answer them.
They're not your normal questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to ask you to describe the England power play for me.
There's no such thing as a power play, but
I know that.
And if there was power play goals, imagine how much you would hate them.
Well, actually, there are moments where one team is playing a man short.
Yeah. If a guy yesterday, I mean, it happens. It hasn't happened too much in the games that I've watched, where a guy goes off injured and then he doesn't, and the team chooses to play 10 men for like a good stretch until they decide to sub.
Why? So why would you choose to play 10 men? Why would you volunteer
You only
to
have
do that?
3 subs in the game. So if you think your guy's coming back on within a few minutes, then you don't take him off.
Okay, but
Right?
no, but they take him off anyway.
No,
Like-
but I mean, take him out of the game. Sub him out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
If he sits on the sideline for 5 minutes, he gets some treatment, and then he comes back on. So for those 5 minutes, they play a man short.
The other
Because
thing I
they're-
don't understand, where I've seen teams playing a man short and they actually don't give up a goal. How does the team with the man advantage not capitalize
Well,
on
I
that?
mean, have you watched a lot of the World Cup, or
A little bit.
It's I think in soccer, it's very. I don't want to say it's easy, because maybe easy is not the right word, but like you can play good defense. Like the teams that advance, like teams like Sweden, or like even Japan that went farther than expected. Like these teams, they play like such a defensive style, which is all you have to do is like be disciplined. And they, as they say, like on the European type of commentary, they're very organized. So like they have like a defensive game plan that they try to deploy, and a lot of times it works, right? So when you're playing a man short, you put all your men in the defensive zone, all, as they say, all your men behind the ball, and then you're basically hoping to take it to penalties. You're hoping to like stretch out the game and then maybe get a goal somehow, or just try to win it in penalties, which is a lot of luck,
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, teams that deploy that type of strategy, you can win a game, you can win 2, you can advance to a certain point, but eventually the better team's going to get you,
Okay, so it's like
Yeah.
the neutral zone trap.
I guess, yeah.
Okay. So anyway, my next question about the World Cup is, so obviously I know that you're a big England supporter,
Mm-hmm.
but where does this rank for you? Like, you've had the Canadians winning Stanley Cups, you've had Duke
Yeah.
winning national championships,
Yeah.
and you've had Team Canada in hockey win Olympic gold, and
Wow.
also World Cups and Canada Cups and those things.
Yeah.
And England's won this thing like in the 90s, I think was the last time they won, right?
No,
or was
they
that
never
Euro?
won. No, they
They-
never won.
They never won the
England
World Cup.
only won the World Cup in 1966.
Oh, but they won Euro.
They never won the Euro.
So what did they win in the 90s?
They didn't.
So what's that song that I keep hearing 3 lines where they won?
It's coming home, it's coming home, it's coming, football's coming home.
They didn't win. That's the whole thing.
No, but there's 2 versions of that song. One where they lose and one where they win.
No, they didn't win. You're getting the songs, but you don't know the context. So the song "It's Coming Home," well, 3 Lions. It's from 1996 when England hosted the Euro. They went all the way to the semifinals and lost on the penalties to Germany. That was in England. So the meaning of the song was like, "It's coming home," was like, we're gonna win it on our home turf,
Okay.
And then they redid the song 2 years later when England was going to the World Cup in France.
Okay.
And they didn't win in France either. They lost on penalties.
So they've
again.
never won the World Cup.
1966. You see I'm wearing my shirt?
Yeah, but what, doesn't have a date?
It has
Oh,
a star.
Yeah. I see the
When
star.
you get a star when you win the World Cup. There's 1 star.
Who gives you the star?
I guess FIFA.
So if you had the shirt before the star, would they then mail you the star after if they won afterwards?
Well, I didn't have a shirt before 1966.
I'm just
but
saying.
I guess some people
I'm
might
just
have.
saying, if they win another one now and they get another star, do they then send you the second star to sew onto your shirt?
You wish it worked that way.
Yeah.
So, by the way, I did write like a blog post this week. I told you about it. It's on our website. You can click on the link on the front page. Gives you a little bit of the history of England in the Euro and in the World Cup, so you can see the devastation that they've gone through and the frustration.
Okay, so where does this rank for you between the Canadians and Duke and Team Canada and the Expos who never won anything?
Yeah.
Where does this rank for you?
It's a really tough question because I was thinking about it this morning. Like we always say, like, what's your favorite sport? It's whatever's on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'd have to say, like, at this very moment today, on July 8th, 2018, this is number 1 for me. This is it. This is number 1. This is bigger than anything.
Mhm.
But, obviously, like, things will change. You know, the Expos come back. Obviously, that would be number one.
Mm-hmm.
Duke's already won the championship so many times. I
Yeah.
feel like maybe when Duke won that first national title, when we beat UNLV in the semis, and
Mhm.
like that probably was bigger for me at the time than this is now. And Canadians winning the cup, I can't even answer. Honestly, I don't know how to answer. All I can tell you is like I'm like I listen. I have that song, Three Lions, both versions playing like all over the house every minute of the day, and my family thinks I'm nuts.
Well, I was gonna say, does your family want to kick you out?
No,
Of the
but they
house?
understand how important it is. Like yesterday was 10 o'clock and the game was on, and I was making noise. You know,
I don't text you during games.
I turned my phone off. I turned my phone off during the penalties against Colombia,
Mm.
so I didn't want to even like be disturbed.
You know, I know the Canadians have won 24 Stanley Cups,
Yeah.
obviously, so they've won a bunch of them. But I didn't even realize this till like a week ago that they haven't won in 25 years.
It's crazy, right? Like
It doesn't
when you think
feel
about
like
it,
such a long time, but it's a
that-
crazy long time.
That 1993 is still pretty clear in my mind, you know, but it's a lifetime ago, and that's what makes it crazy when you think about England, right? So when the guys from the Lightning Seeds wrote that song in '96, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was 30 years since England won the World Cup. Now a whole 22 more years has passed since they even wrote that song. You know, like they were saying, like half the England team weren't even born when England made it to the semifinals in 1990. You know, so in the World Cup, so like there's a whole generation that don't even like England football is like they don't even think that it's possible to win the World Cup. Whereas like back in the 90s, like the World Cup and somewhat success in soccer was still like fresh in people's minds. They're like, yeah, England can do it, you know, whatever. But lately it's like, no, England sucked. They lost to Iceland, you know? like that's what people think. So I think this team is changing the way England fans look at them anyways.
But yet, for as long as I've been alive, every time there's a World Cup or a Euro, everyone says, oh, England's a strong team. England's going
Yeah.
to make it to the Final Four. England's
Yeah.
going to, go to the championship game. But that's based on what? I mean, if they've never had any history of it, why do
Well,
they say that?
I mean, it's based on like the Premier League, which is full of players from England, is, you know, extremely strong. And over the years, they have had star players, you know, Wayne Rooney, Beckham, Steven Gerrard. I'm going to want to like get into like players that you know Beckham, right?
I
And
know all
Rooney.
those guys you named.
Yeah. So like a lot of it is you know how the British media are, the papers there and the press, they're mental, right? So there's so much attention paid to England, you know, sometimes that they're always overhyped. And that's why this team is interesting, because they were kind of underhyped. They came in with no expectations and people were like, this team's too young and they're not ready yet and England always suck, and now they're like, now the whole country is playing saying football's coming home. You know, you had the BBC broadcaster, former England player Alan Shearer, singing football's coming home at a press conference. And you had like it's just crazy when you see on Twitter and like even the players what they're tweeting. And so I don't know, I'm having a great time and I don't know how it's gonna end, but hopefully it'll end well.
Okay, one last question, because we spent too much time on soccer.
Yeah. No, we didn't. I told you, soccer's the only thing going on this week.
I know. So when there's other sporting events on television,
Mm-hmm.
I always ask you this question. So now I'm going to ask you the same question, but it's about soccer.
Okay.
And that is, have you been watching on TSN or on Fox?
No, TSN. I actually only realized it was on Fox yesterday.
Okay. So why TSN over Fox?
Well, does Fox show all the games?
They do now.
Okay.
Like they didn't in the preliminary round.
TSN is like, I think for you also, it's like my go-to sporting channel,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I don't know. I just been watching all the time on TSN. Not that it even matters. No,
Well, they
like-
have different play-by-play announcers on
Yeah,
Fox.
I should watch on Fox because they probably have better play-by-play announcers.
Well, I don't know
on
if they're
Fox.
better. They're American. They're not
Oh
European.
no, that's no good. Although the British guy yesterday in the England Sweden game, I can't stand him. I don't even know his name, but he's so over dramatic about everything.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I'm glad you brought up the broadcast. I have been watching on TSN,
Mm-hmm.
and TSN have been they've been like big weasels when it comes to like the advertising that they have for the games.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I know what
Every-
you're going to say.
Every game is like in the knockout stages now, the games are at 2, right?
Mhm,
And then
yeah.
the other games have been at 10.
Yeah.
And then when they show like tomorrow coming up, England versus Sweden, 9 a.m.
Yes,
and you know
yes.
damn well the game's at 10, and then they're like Russia, Croatia, 1 p.m. But the game's at 2.
Yes.
But like they really show you that it's at 1. Like
Yes,
they
'cause-
don't they
'cause
doesn't
they
even
want you
say
to
like
watch the 1 hour pregame show.
oh, and the 1 hour pregame, it's like, I mean, I didn't even have it on most of the time.
And
Actually,
then-
to tell you the truth, I had the TV on mute and I was listening to British pregame from British radio stations on the internet
Okay.
to get
And then
the real.
and then if you actually watch the pregame show, you see the TSN panel there.
yeah,
For the morning games, they each have a bottle of orange juice in front of them
Yeah.
that isn't even open. And
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
afternoon games, they all have a bottle of Coca-Cola in front of
Yeah.
them that isn't even open.
it's beautiful.
Or maybe it's a can of Coke. I don't know if it's a can or a bottle.
yeah, no, it's like it's a bottle, I think. But yeah, I see the orange juice in the morning.
Yeah.
games.
So that's another reason not to watch the
Yeah, like who
pregame
were they
show.
fooling, right? Yeah.
So anyway, changing gears a little bit,
So that's the soccer segment. So are you switching away from soccer? I just want to say one thing.
I'm switching away from soccer.
Okay. I mean, I think I've said it all already. You can continue. I mean, just like, when we started this podcast and like about a few weeks ago when the Capitals won the Stanley Cup, we talked about like what's so great about sports, the highs and lows and the emotion of it and the drama and like the World Cup, especially like if you're an England fan, this is the pinnacle, this is it. When they won in the penalty kicks, which is something that never happens, like that's as high as you're going to get,
So anyway, one more thing since you mentioned it about soccer.
Yeah.
It amazes me how many people miss their penalty kick. Like the
It's-
net is huge.
It's huge.
How
I
you miss?
I understand if the goalie saves it. Like the goalie could save it. It's like they like our buddy Tony Kornheiser says, it's 50-50. So like they guess which way and then they get lucky, or maybe they've got a read on the kick, so they kind of know where it's going. But like sometimes they miss. Like they literally miss the net. Right? That's not good.
Anyway, so I wanted to talk a bit about hockey.
Hockey. There's
Yeah,
still
well-
hockey going on.
Well, actually, we got some listener mail.
Oh, I'm so excited.
The National Hockey League.
So, Dave from Toronto
Mm-hmm.
wrote into us because he liked our John Tavares segment. Clearly,
He did?
Clearly he's a Leafs fan because he's in Toronto and he's happy
Is
that
this
the
the
Leafs
same?
got.
Is this the same guy that got mad at you for getting for saying bad stuff about Frederick Anderson?
No, it's a different guy.
Okay.
Completely
okay.
different guy.
Okay.
That was Joe's friend who lives in the States now.
Okay. Okay.
So Dave, he writes in, and I don't have the email in front of me, but basically on the same day that the Leafs signed former New York Islander John Tavares, on the very same day,
Mm-hmm.
the Islanders signed former Leafs Leo Komarov and Matt Martin. So essentially, the Leafs unloaded a couple of fourth liners for Tavares.
That's great.
Yeah.
You think the Islanders are happy with that trade?
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
But it was a very good weekend for Toronto sports fans. We didn't talk about this on our last episode because it happened after.
Right.
But LeBron went to the Western Conference.
LeBron signed literally a few hours after we recorded last week. Then LeBron signed.
Right.
Oh.
So he went to the Western Conference, which is, the Raptors can't beat the Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron.
Yeah.
So now, I'm not saying they're going to win it all, but now at least they have a shot to get out of the Eastern Conference.
They have no excuses now.
No excuses now.
We're not supposed to talk about basketball anymore, though.
Why is that?
We
Oh,
said
right.
last week we weren't going to talk about it anymore.
No, well, I was just talking about Toronto sports fans being really happy because they had a great weekend. They signed
Yeah.
Tavares and they got rid of LeBron. So
Toronto sports fans have a lot to be happy about. The Tavares signing is huge. You
it
know?
is huge. It is
but
huge.
like they say, the expectations just got higher. You
That's
know?
right. That's right.
The expectations
I
just
think
got
Vegas
higher.
actually has them favored to win the cup, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, that is extreme. Well, I
So-
mean, look, they're loaded. They're loaded offensively, but like I said, you know how the Toronto press is and the Toronto media is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, as soon as they have a 2-game losing streak, well, it's going to be what's wrong with Tavares.
So I have a
You know,
question.
honestly,
I have a question for you.
yeah.
How do you like the Shea Weber trade now?
I never liked it in the first place. Well, I mean, look, I hate that we're going to talk about this. I was never one of these guys that was like, oh my God, it's the worst trade ever. Or like, because there's obviously PK Subban has huge fans here still, and those fans hate the trade no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And I was neutral about it. I was like, yeah, they got a great player. They gave a great player, you know? And personally, I think at the time, I think Shea Weber was better than Subban and maybe
Mhm.
more suited for our team. What I didn't like was that Weber was older,
Mhm.
right? And so that trade, if the Habs were going to win that trade, it was going to be in the first 3 years. Because
Right.
after that, they're not going to win the trade. Because
Exactly.
Subban's still going to be great and Weber's going to be getting worse. And that's where we are now, right?
Well, we're past that now.
We're past that now, but the Habs have gotten worse with Weber, and not that Weber's played bad. He was injured for most of last year, and he will be injured for seems like most of this year now. Apparently,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not good at all. You
All
know,
right.
when you look back as the GM, at one point, Mark Bergevin is going to get fired. I don't know when it's going to be. Maybe
Mhm.
it's tomorrow. Maybe it's 5 years from now. Maybe the ownership loves him. You know, who knows? At one point, when you look back when my son is an adult and he's got his own family and he's talking to his kids about the Montreal Canadiens and they look back and then they're going to be like, oh, remember when we traded PK Subban? That's what Mark Bergevin is going to be remembered for. You know,
Mhm.
unless they win a Stanley Cup when he's the GM, the only thing he's going to be remembered for is he's the guy that traded Subban. You know, just like Réjean Houle was the guy that traded Patrick Roy, you know?
That's right. And so, thank you for reminding me. I don't know if you saw during the Stanley Cup Finals,
Mm-hmm.
Sportsnet was airing this documentary about the Canadians and the last Stanley Cup they won. So anyway, I watched it. I had recorded it like a month ago and watched it recently. And that's when it was only then that I realized that it's been 25 years since they won a Stanley Cup.
Well, that's the last Canadian team.
Yes. The other thing that I completely forgot. I wasn't a Canadians fan at the time, so I actually wasn't happy that they won the cup.
I want to explain to the listeners a little bit about Josh's fandom. Maybe you can explain it better than me.
Well,
You never liked the Canadians. You actually hated them.
I liked them before I knew you.
Yes, but then you went through a stage where you didn't like the Canadians at all.
I hated them because they traded my favorite player, and it broke my heart. It did. I was a young kid at the time.
Can you tell everybody who your favorite player was?
My favorite player was Rick Walmsley.
Yeah. So after they traded Rick Walmsley,
Yes.
a better than average goaltender.
Which, by the way, was not a good trade for the Canadians because
I
they were
know it
left with
wasn't a
Richard
good trade,
Sevigny.
but
So
like-
another bad trade the Canadians made.
But But Rick Walmsley is like a footnote in the history of the Habs. He's like a nothing. That's the reason to stop following the team. I guess when you're a kid and they trade your favorite player, you say screw that.
That was my reason.
And then somehow when you moved to Toronto,
Mhm.
you became a Habs fan again.
Well, there was a couple of things. First, I got annoyed of listening to Leaf fans call into talk radio shows and talk about the fourth line guys on the Leafs, and it should be this guy instead of that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, they do the same thing in Montreal, but it was just annoying to hear it.
They
here.
do the same thing, yeah.
So that was one thing. Also, the second thing was I had to do a school project, a school assignment, my first year in Toronto.
Right.
And we had to interview a manager in the sports industry.
Okay.
We could anyone we want,
Right.
and do some sort of report on it. I don't even remember what the assignment was called. And so I figured, okay, well, I'd like to interview the general manager of the Montreal Canadiens.
Right.
And so I
Who was
contacted.
it? Who was it at the time?
It was Bob Gainey.
Okay.
So I contacted the Canadians at the time, and I said, "Look, I've got this class project, and I'd like to interview Bob Gainey, and here's the questions I'm going to ask." And they said yes, and you have to show up to the Bell Center on this date at this
Really?
time. Yeah, I never
Yeah.
told you this.
No, I never heard this.
Oh, so, and I was living in Toronto, but I would go back to Montreal quite often. So, they accommodated me and they let me interview Bob Gainey on a Saturday morning because I happened to be in Montreal that weekend. And it was actually a game day. I think the Canadians were playing either the Ottawa Senators or the Boston Bruins that night. And the reason I remember that is because as I was walking into the Bell Center, someone else was walking into the Bell Center at the same time. And it was Zdeno Chara.
Oh, okay.
So anyway,
He's hard to miss, I guess.
he's hard to miss. And so anyway, so I interviewed Bob Gainey and I wrote my report and I remember getting a good grade on it. And so that's part of the reason why I became a Canadiens fan again, because of that.
Oh, that's cool. I never even knew that.
Okay. I thought you knew.
Maybe you told me. Who knows? Who knows what I can remember these days?
But there was a point to this conversation, and I don't remember what the point was.
How you became a Habs fan again, or are you talking about the original question was you asking me how do I like the Subban for Weber?
Right, no, but then I mentioned the documentary.
Yeah.
So in the documentary, obviously everyone knows that the Canadiens won 10 consecutive overtime games, which is insane.
Yeah.
And yes, they won the cup, and they won it deservedly. But when you win 10 overtime games, any of those games could have gone the other way.
Absolutely.
So they were very lucky.
They were hugely lucky.
But the other reason they were lucky was because in the second round, first of all, they should have lost in the first round because I think Quebec finished higher than them in the standings, if I recall.
By a couple of points, yeah.
So they should have actually lost in the first round, but they didn't. Then had they were really supposed to play Boston in the second round. But Boston got upset by Buffalo.
Yeah.
And if you recall, Boston had beaten the Canadiens, I think, 3 consecutive times in the playoffs.
Yeah, around that time, yeah.
And so the Canadiens were very lucky that they got to play Buffalo instead of Boston in the second round.
And they won 4 straight against Buffalo. And talk
Yes.
about luck, all 4 of those games could have went either way, but it ended up 4
Right,
straight.
because they were all 1-goal games, I think.
Yeah.
And then they were lucky again because in the next round, they really should have played Mario Lemieux and the Pittsburgh Penguins, who
Lost
had
to the
won
Islanders.
who had won the cup, I think, 2 years in a row.
Yeah, and then they
But
lost
some-
to the Islanders.
But somehow the Islanders upset the Penguins.
That's how
So
it goes. You can
so
only play, like I said, for
I know,
England.
but
They
then
can
the
only play
Canadians
who's in
get
front
to
of
play
them.
the Islanders instead of Pittsburgh. Like, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, huge.
And then, of course, in the finals, as you alluded to a few episodes ago, in game 2, the Canadiens were on the ropes. They were losing. They had lost game 1. And then if not for that illegal stick penalty call, they don't win the Stanley Cup.
The best part of that documentary is when they talk about the illegal stick call. And how, like, Kerry Fraser, like, he goes to McSorley and he tells him, and then McSorley's basically face turns white because he knows he's caught, and Kerry Fraser talking about how he had to use this apparatus to measure the curve.
Yeah.
And basically, like, he didn't even have to measure. Like, as soon as he put the thing on the stick, he was like, well, this is like breaking the machine, basically. It's
Yeah.
so over curved, it's like, you can't even measure it.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's, for me, that was the best part of it, so.
Anyhow, so just there was so much luck involved in that 1993 Stanley Cup is basically.
So, who will be the next Canadian team to win the cup?
Well, I mean,
According to Bodog, it's the Leafs.
right. So many things can happen. You can't even say.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at the state of the Canadian teams, like Montreal's in the toilet. They don't seem like there doesn't seem to be a Stanley Cup even remotely on the horizon.
Nope.
Ottawa even worse.
Nope. Winnipeg's good.
Winnipeg is good. Calgary is like in a kind of Calgary's in a kind of rebuild. Vancouver's terrible.
Edmonton's also good.
Edmonton, how good are they that they didn't make the playoffs? But I mean, they have McDavid, so I think they have hope. But yeah,
Right.
I mean, I thought Winnipeg was going to win this year. Like, I really like their chances as the playoffs were progressing.
I didn't think they were going to win. It's their first year in the playoffs, and a lot of their guys are still young. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, good for them, but and I think they'll be back next year, but I didn't think they were going to win it all.
I guess it's like the Leafs or the Jets have the best chance.
We'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean the National Hockey League season, we'll look forward to it. I mean, the regular season is not always that exciting because it's so long, but
One more hockey note. I was watching, as you know, I'm watching The Americans.
yeah.
And in episode 3, it's very funny because there's a bunch of guys at a restaurant and they're talking about baseball because that episode was during the World Series.
Oh yeah, it was the Twins versus I don't know, it was the Twins playing though.
Yeah, I forget who they were playing.
Yeah.
And they're also the Russians there because the Americans and the Russians were having lunch together. or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
So the
Yeah.
Russian guy says, "Oh, I prefer hockey." And he mentions the Canada Cup and Gretzky and Lemieux.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except he doesn't call it the Canada Cup. He calls it the Canadian Cup.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Like, I mean, you would think the fact checker of who's writing the show would get that right.
you would think.
Come on, how hard is that?
I like that part of the Americans when they were showing the little bit of baseball footage with the Twins and all that, you know?
Yes, and they showed some hockey footage in this past season.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So,
good. The show was good.
Yeah.
I can't wait for you to finish it, and then we'll talk about it.
Yes, we can't talk about it now.
I know you have I think you have a couple more, right?
Yeah. So I'm done with hockey.
Okay.
Major League Baseball.
So I don't know if you recall, it was maybe a month or two ago, I had a suggestion for Major League Baseball on how to eliminate all these rainouts that happen in April.
Right. It was like more double headers,
Right.
different scheduling. Yeah.
Yeah. So along those lines, I have another suggestion for Major League Baseball. Really, they should actually hire me to be their commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
If you recall, when we were watching baseball in the 80s and even in the 90s, baseball rosters were 25 players, just like they are today. However, and I think you'll agree with me, each team carried 10 pitchers. They had 5 starting pitchers, 5 relievers, and 2 catchers, and the rest were like position players.
Yeah. Usually it was 10. The rule of thumb was like 10 pitchers. Yeah.
Right. So now, these days, it's still 25 players, but teams carry 12, sometimes 13 pitchers.
Yeah.
And they have like no backups on the bench in case they need whatever. They have like maybe one backup infielder who can play all the infield positions and one backup outfielder who can play all the outfield positions.
Yeah.
And a backup catcher, and that's it.
Well, in theory, that's all you need, right? Because if you have your starting lineup, you know what it is. If a guy gets injured, you just need a replacement for that one day. You know?
I guess. But anyway, the point being that there's more pitchers.
Yeah, they're very
And-
specialized.
right,
Because they
and-
have a lefty that just pitches to one batter.
Right. And so this is the problem. This is why games are so long now, because there's more pitching changes in every game because managers have more options. They can use a guy for one batter because they know they have a 13-man pitching staff.
Yeah. Pitching changes are a huge delay of time. For
So,
sure.
but if I don't want to, they have this rule this year where the catcher can only go out to the mound a certain number of times per game.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been other discussions saying that they want to limit the number of pitching changes that a manager can make. And even a suggestion came up that you can't make a pitching change during the inning. And of course,
Which is that's ridiculous.
managers would lose their mind if you told them they couldn't make a pitching change during an
That's actually going to make the games longer, and it's going to injure players.
Well,
Injure
I don't
pitchers.
know. I don't know if it's going to injure pitchers because remember, back in the 80s, like I said, they only had 10-man pitching staff and everyone was fine.
I know, but if you start your pitcher and he's already like tiring and he starts getting hit hard in the 7th inning and you can't take him out, you have to leave him in. He might not get anybody out.
I'm not suggesting they implement that rule, but what I am
Okay.
suggesting is they implement a different rule where you
Okay.
can only carry a maximum of 10 pitchers, which would then make the manager think twice. Wait a minute, I only have 5 guys in the bullpen. If I use this guy for only one batter, then I'm screwed. So maybe I'm not going to make as many pitching changes as I would have before. And don't tell me that pitchers are going to get injured because, like I said, in the 80s and 90s, they only had 5 guys in the bullpen and everything was fine. What happened back then is managers would let their starters go longer. Now you see starters are out after the 5th or 6th inning now, but used to be starters pitch 7, 8, sometimes 9 innings back then.
Yeah, and then they used to let also the relievers pitch more than 1 inning.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
a closer didn't have to. Well, the specialization of the closer is, that's a big part of the whole problem in that, you know, a closer can only come in for the last inning. We
Right.
never did our episode just on the save stat, how it
No,
ruined baseball.
We
But
didn't,
we
but
should.
my point is,
Yeah.
I think if you limit the number of pitchers you're allowed to carry on your roster, that would indirectly shorten the length of games.
While I do agree that if you did that, it would shorten things up, I'm in the camp that there is actually nothing wrong with baseball, and they shouldn't have to implement any rules that affect strategy. So, like, carry as many pitchers as you want, leave them in, change as many times as you need to. Like, that is what baseball is, and they should just leave it alone. You know, if they're worried about like that the game doesn't talk to the young, doesn't reach the young fans anymore, it's too boring and all this, you know, like there's other things they can do. First of all, try putting a World Series game on at a time when kids could watch. You know, instead of having the game start close to 9 o'clock and ending after 1 o'clock in the morning, why don't you start them at 7? You know, there's so many things that they could do, smaller things that don't have to affect like the rules specifically, you know, like make it more appealing for people to watch, and they'll watch.
Okay.
That's what I think anyways.
All right. I just like the way things were in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah, but I mean, there's so much more information now.
I
you
think
know?
pitchers are babied so much these days.
They
Like,
are.
Like
There's no
he
doubt.
can't pitch more than X number of pitches, and it's, you know, he's now facing all the batters in the lineup for the third time, and so he won't be able to get them out.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
mean,
think there's some truth to like once you face a pitcher once or a batter once, you kind of know their secrets.
But even like crappy starting pitchers like I think Andy McGaffigan, was he not one of the starters on the Expos way back in the day?
He was like a starter middle reliever, yeah.
Right. When he pitched, they let him go 6-7 innings,
Yeah.
you know.
You'd go as long as he was doing well.
But if he was pitching in today's game,
5 innings, he's out.
exactly.
Yeah.
A guy like that.
The pitch count is really like a little bit too harsh. It's like they look at it way too much. And I don't really think, I mean, people can email, tweet at me, whatever. I don't think there's actual evidence. I'm going to sound like Gary Bettman here with concussions and CTE, but like, I don't think there's actual evidence that shows that, you know, if you pitch over 100 pitches or 120 pitches, that you're at a greater risk for an injury. Like, I don't know. Like, how does that work? You know, you don't know for a fact. You know, like, remember when Strasburg came back from his injury and they said, oh, we're not going to pitch him more than 100 pitches in a game or 90 pitches.
Yeah.
Even though we're going to the playoffs, we're still going to take him out. That's absurd. You know, that was ridiculous, you know? Like, you don't know. Like, you just don't know. Like, how come some pitchers don't ever get injured? You know, and they're like, oh, this pitcher's too small. He's too frail. He's always going to get hurt. Well, I don't know. Pedro Martinez had a pretty good career, and he was tiny.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And he used to pitch, and he used to throw 120 pitches plus per game. You know, you can't claim to like know everything. You know, analytics and advanced stats and all the information that we have now. This applies to every sport. It's all great. It's all great. The more you know, the better. I'm all for knowledge, right? But it's not everything. It can't be everything. It can't be the only thing you look at is stats. You have to look at you have to use your eyes, your brain. You have to have an opinion, you know? Like, you're allowed to make a decision, you know, based on things other than a number, you know? So
Which is why I'm saying that right now, these days, starting pitchers get taken out of games way too early. And the thing is, you know what? Pitcher X, his arm might be hurting him after 50 pitches. I don't know.
Yeah.
But pitcher A, he might be able to throw 120 pitches and his arm doesn't hurt. I mean, it's different per pitcher.
Yeah, but it's interesting that like a lot of times once you get into the playoffs, some of these rules that they have during the regular season, they just throw them away.
Yeah,
so that
that's
makes
so
me
annoying.
wonder, like, do you really believe in it, or do you actually subscribe to these rules or not? Because you know what happens in the playoffs, like the Dodgers use Kenley Jansen 600 games in a row, you know, or they're, you know, Clayton Kershaw or whoever your best starter is. I use Kershaw as an example, but like it could be anybody. Your best starter pitched like 2 days ago. Well, you bring him you'll bring him in relief in Game 7. You know, like how does that work? You would never do that in the regular season because God forbid he would get injured.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So
Exactly.
so that it's like a little bit of it's a little bit like
Anyway,
disingenuous. You know?
I would like to see the rosters limited to 10 pitchers, because the other reason is if you carry 12 or 13 pitchers, chances are pitchers number 11, 12, and 13 aren't that good anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't want to see them in the majors.
Well, a lot of times, like I said, it's like a left-handed pitcher that comes. His whole job is to pitch 1/3 of an inning, get one guy out. You know,
So I'm done with that.
you're done with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really hope someone at the MLB headquarters is listening to our show.
You think?
I hope. I don't think. I hope.
Great. You have anything else, or we're going to close the show?
Let's close the show.
All right. So before we sign off, I want to remind everybody that to make sure you never miss an episode of the Skip and Josh podcast, you have to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or the podcast app of your choice. Me and Josh are both huge fans of Overcast, which is an Apple Store app only. If you listen via Apple Podcasts, please make sure to leave us a review. Email skipandjoshshow@gmail.com. Twitter, I'm on it like 6 million times a day on our account at skipandjosh. And you can like and follow our Facebook page and leave us a review there now. And as always, skipandjosh.com has all the links. So you got anything for the show close?
I got one thing.
Yeah, what is it?
So I finished listening to one of the seasons of Origins, that podcast that I told you about.
Yeah, it's great.
So I haven't listened to any of the Curb Your Enthusiasm season yet, but I finished listening to the ESPN season.
It was good. I like the Curb better, actually.
Well, I'll listen to Curb and we can talk about it, but I have a couple comments on the ESPN season.
Sure.
I really liked the PTI episode.
It's good.
And I even liked the College Game Day episode, even though I don't ever watch College Game Day.
It was great, the College Game Day episode.
However, the social media episode
It's too
and the
political.
Sports Center episode kind of bothered me in a way, because if you listen to the people that they interview, like Bill Simmons, like what's her name, Jamel Hill,
Yeah.
right, and others, I'm just picking out those two.
Yeah.
If you listen to them talk, and actually Bill Simmons was only on the 30 for 30
Yeah.
episode.
Well,
But if
you know
listen-
he has an agenda against ESPN. Like, obviously, like, he's not pro ESPN.
But if you listen to them talk, they make it seem like working at ESPN was like the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
You know, like if someone just landed here and never watched ESPN and didn't know what it was, and
Yeah.
listened to that podcast
They
and
think
listened
it's
to the
evil.
comments that those people made, they make it sound like working at ESPN was the worst thing ever.
Well,
And
Jamel Hill is still employed by ESPN, is she not?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
And,
okay, I get it. I'm sure these people had issues because they're creative people and they were being stifled or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But like, still, working at ESPN is probably one of the best jobs on the planet.
Bill Simmons has said it before, and he's very hard on ESPN, and you know, obviously the whole history. But he said it. He reluctantly will tell you, and he said it on his show. Like, he owes everything to ESPN. He owes
Right.
everything to John Skipper. That's the guy who put his faith in him. You know, he gave him everything. You know, and Bill is brilliant when it comes to marketing and social media and all this stuff. He's a little bit like he was ahead of his time and still is. And you know, he ran with what they started for him. You know,
The
but
other
I mean,
guy
he'll be
that-
the first to admit that he owes it all to ESPN. You know.
Well, I hope he does. The other
Yeah,
guy
yeah.
that annoyed me when they interviewed him was Keith Olbermann. Everyone talks about Keith Olbermann like he's some idiot savant genius.
He's
You
just
know what?
a sports announcer.
Exactly. He's just a sports announcer. And like, you know, you can pick Joe Schmo off the street and that
Yeah.
person might have done just as good a job, if not better. And Keith Olbermann's like, oh, I can't believe they made me work with this guy. And I can't believe they made me say this every episode. Like, really? You have one of the best jobs on the planet and you're making
Yeah.
it sound like someone had a gun to your head. If you didn't like it, you could have just quit.
In general, I'm a fan of Olbermann just because he's such a baseball fan. So like, I like that about him, you know, but he's over the top and he has too many crazy opinions and he thinks, look,
He thinks he's
you
never wrong.
Remember
Also.
when like we talked about it a few times when we were on with the semi-intellectual musings guys,
Mm-hmm.
they're like, we like you guys because you're not sports snobs, you know? But like Olbermann, he makes everybody painfully aware that he's the smartest guy in the room.
Well, that's what he
You know,
thinks.
that's what he thinks. You know,
Right,
that's what
right.
he thinks. Like, and that's what comes off when you see him on TV. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm the smartest guy in the room. Don't even talk to me about this. You know,
Right,
like
exactly.
what I say goes, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So, I saw our friend of the show, Mike from Atlanta, this week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
How's he doing?
He's doing good, and we had a really interesting discussion about baseball. He doesn't listen to the podcast, so he's not even going to hear this.
No, I
like
know
I
he
know he
doesn't
doesn't listen, but we talked about, I mentioned to him that we talked about how Major League Baseball wants to implement rules on restricting the shift. Right?
Yes.
And I told them, like, isn't it crazy? Like, how can they police that? And how can you prevent, like, everything I just told you, like, how can you put in a rule that prevents strategy? You know? And he told me, I was flabbergasted. He said to me straight out, he goes, I would be all for that.
Oh, I'm so disappointed to hear that.
I was like, excuse me? And he made his point, and I understand his point. But, like, I still don't agree with it, but I can respect his opinion on it. Like,
what was his point?
His point is, he goes, something has to be done. Right now, there's more strikeouts than hits.
Okay.
You know? And
so
the shift
hitters
is
have
taking,
to get better then.
That's what I say. But he's like, if this can promote guys getting hits again, maybe it's going to reduce, it's going to start getting baseball back to where it was in a little bit, that it's not only about the home run, you know? Because right now, singles are at an all-time low, you know? So, I mean, he didn't know. Like I said, well, how are they going to enforce this? He's like, I don't know. That's not my problem. But like, you know, basically, but like, I don't know. How would they enforce it? It seems absurd to me. But when it comes to baseball, nothing would surprise me when it comes to Major League Baseball and the rules. You never know what they would come up with. Because, like, for instance, like the home plate collision rule is completely good intentioned, but it's completely screwed up and no one really actually knows what it is. Same thing with like the sliding at second base, like good intentions, but again, it's like implemented wrong, you know? So it scares me that they would want to implement a rule about shifting, because who knows what kind of wacky stuff they'd come up with.
Historically, baseball has been the slowest of the four
Always.
major team sports to adopt new rules.
Always. Yeah, always.
But one thing I will say, I don't think there should be a rule about the shift. Like, if you want to have all 9 guys on the same side of the field, go ahead.
Fine, of course.
But it is a bigger disadvantage to left-handed hitters, because you're always going to have a first baseman standing at first base. Whereas if you have a right-handed hitter, you're not going to move your first baseman to the other side of the diamond.
Yeah, that's true.
So it is
That's
a
true.
bigger disadvantage for left-handed hitters, but I still don't think they should change anything.
But don't you feel like the shift is done more to left-handed hitters also?
Well, only because you already have a guy at first
Yeah.
base that's never going to move.
Right.
When you have a left-handed hitter up there, you could put your third baseman in right field, and
right.
it doesn't matter.
The first baseman has to still be near the bag no matter what.
Right. So if you have a right-handed hitter, you can't move your first baseman off of first base.
No, I guess you could put
So-
everybody on the
so
left side
left-
of the field and no one at second base, but
So left-handed hitters have a disadvantage, but still, I don't care.
no, I don't care either. All right, that's all I got.
Me too.
Good show.
Talk to you later.
The Skip and Josh podcast is over now. Don't worry, there'll be another episode soon.